All right, my name is Will Brown, Associate Professor at the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University. I'm going to give you just a couple of thoughts about communication practices to help guide conversations with participants of the program. Basically, I'm just going to got these 4 items I want to touch on. This idea of typical problems that people confront in communication, the importance of relationships as a foundation for effective communication, some key concepts, and the obstacles that we confront when we try to be an effective communicator. By and large, there's a bit too much reliance on technology, and in particular email. Oftentimes it's too much information and it lacks an effective interpretation of the context that people are trying to communicate, and so we can easily misinterpret what happens. We all know when we write too long of an email, or we write an email that isn't quite clear, and that the interpretation is really dependent upon the way that we perceive the relationship. So as individuals who are getting an email from their boss are going to have one reaction versus if they're getting an email from a colleague or a friend. And beyond that is that generally most folks think that they're pretty darn good communicators, and that can really lead to a number of challenges as we think about how to be able to be more effective in our communication practices. One of the pieces that I wanted to just emphasize is the importance of relationships, that we get to know folks and then it's on a personal level, and that we can sort of understand where people are coming from. It is critical for the context of communication so that we can interpret language, body language. We can interpret the actions as well as the words, and to be able to put those into a frame of understanding about people's purposes and about their intents. And so making time to get to know folks, places, makes it that much easier to be able to communicate effectively. By and large, this is good for everybody. Better physical and emotional well-being, as well as functioning and performing at work. So taking the time to get to know the individuals you're working with, it does pay off. Fundamentally, it's important to focus on accuracy and be clear and precise. That's probably where we find ourselves falling down, is that we're sort of too quick to communicate, but also the reality is that sometimes things are complex, and so it takes time to be able to work our way through all of those issues. One distinction that's kind of nice to think on is this idea of whether you're focusing on giving advice, trying to help somebody figure out a better way to be able to do something, or whether you're trying to help them figure out what the issue or what the problem is. Some of the literature talks about coaching versus counseling. Anyhow, I found that these are 2 helpful distinctions in my communication to clarify when I'm moving from one to the other. And spending a bit of time of helping folks define the problem, and focusing in on their attitudes and their perceptions about some of these things, and then helping folks develop up some strategies. Obviously, if we can get a better sense about what the issue is that we're concerned about, it makes it that much more effective to be able to come up with some advice about what to be able to do. So those are kind of really simple pieces of advice. Where we run into trouble, of course, as we begin to try and talk to folks, is that folks are either feeling defensive, and so they feel threatened, and then they move into a pretty quick mode to sort of protect themselves, and they're focused and thinking only about how they can protect, and they're not listening to the conversation. Or folks, what's called disconfirmation, which is they begin to feel bad about themselves, and so they begin to think about how can I demonstrate my self-worth, and focusing on my importance. So again, they're not listening. And so what we try to do is we encourage folks, try to not encourage these things in our communication. So we try not to attack individuals so that they begin to feel threatened, or that we begin to belittle individuals so that they feel like they are less capable and less competent. And again, these things are slightly less likely to happen in stronger and more healthy relationships. People feel like they can trust each other. They're less likely to feel defensive or to feel like they're being put out when they know that they're appreciated in other ways. Just a couple of quick thoughts, but I think that might be helpful in some of your conversations.